A few days later, Dr. Adaobi received the biggest birthday gift of her life. Frank, his wife Lillian, and Nelson, her son, paid her a surprise visit. She instructed her security to let them in. Overjoyed, she ran to Nelson, hugging him passionately as tears streamed down her face. We had to tell him the truth about his biological mother. He couldn't stop asking questions, Lillian explained. The room filled with an overwhelming sense of reconciliation and hope, marking the beginning of a new chapter for Dr. Adaobi and her beloved son. Dr. Adaobi stared at Frank with an expression of disdain before turning to take her son into her living room, leaving Frank and Lillian standing awkwardly in the doorway. She sat quietly with Nelson, her fingers gently tracing his features as tears streamed down her face. Nelson, deeply moved by her emotional display, hugged his mother tightly, and they wept together. Nelson decided to stay with his mother while Frank and Lillian returned home. Frank, overwhelmed with shame for his past actions, left without uttering a word to Adaobi. Nelson quickly grew fond of his new home and embraced Auntie Moami as his grandmother. When Barrister Zinni heard that Dr. Adaobi was dropping all charges against the Bayods, she was alarmed. She confronted Adaobi, insisting that something felt off about the situation. "Stay alert," she advised. "The Bayods won't give up without a fight." Adaobi, however, reassured her friend with a calm smile. "Everything is fine, Zinni. No cause for alarm," she said, though a lingering tension hinted that the final chapter of her struggle might yet be unwritten. The news of Frank and Lillian being found shot dead in their car spread like wildfire, with fingers immediately pointing at Dr. Adaobi as the prime suspect. This catastrophe thrust her into a maelstrom of trouble. Once again, her son was taken from her, and she was placed under house arrest while investigations proceeded. Nelson's grandparents took him back, confining him to his room to prevent him from returning to his mother. In a single night, Dr. Adaobi lost all her business transactions and partners. Her social media following plummeted as people unfollowed her, branding her a ruthless villain. The pain of these betrayals and accusations broke her spirit, but through it all, Auntie Moami remained steadfast by her side, offering unwavering support. Dr. Adaobi called on her two steadfast friends, Sarah and Barrister Zinni. They were her last beacon of hope. "I told you they would never give up without a fight," Barrister Zinni said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I know," Dr. Adaobi replied, tears streaming down her face. "I was so naive to think life would ever treat me fairly. The question is, what are we going to do now?" Sarah asked, her tone urgent. "Now that she's being taken to court, we need solid evidence to prove her innocence and finally pin the Bayods down," Barrister Zinni suggested. Dr. Adaobi wiped her tears, a glimmer of determination returning to her eyes. "I have an insider in the Bayod household. I'll reach out to her and see if she can gather any useful information." With the Bayods wielding immense influence, they turned the world against Dr. Adaobi and her family. "She's a foolish girl," Chief Bayod sneered into the phone. "A stubborn fly destined to follow the corpse to the grave. I want Ada to taste the full wrath of the Bayods." He continued, his voice dripping with malice. "Son, lie low for now until she's dead. I've got plans to execute her before any judgment is passed." As Chief Bayod exited his inner sanctum, Nelson, who had secretly recorded the entire conversation, slipped out of the room unnoticed. With the help of a sympathetic maid, he escaped and made his way to Dr. Adaobi's residence. However, unbeknownst to them, one of Dr. Adaobi's security men was a Bayod loyalist. He immediately informed Chief Bayod, who dispatched men to raid the house and kidnap Dr. Adaobi and Nelson. Dr. Adaobi's hopes of a safe reunion with her son were dashed as they found themselves once again caught in the Bayod's ruthless grasp. The fight for justice and freedom took on a new urgency, with danger lurking at every corner. The news reported that Dr. Adaobi had likely staged her own kidnapping to avoid her upcoming court case. Auntie Moami was furious at the speculation. "Idiots! No one is focusing on rescuing her," she ranted in frustration. Sarah and Barrister Zinni were deep in thought, trying to figure out their next move. Bamii and Doni entered with the maid who had led Nelson to the house. They questioned her about her motives, and she explained that Nelson had evidence proving his mother's innocence. "He didn't tell me what it was, but he said it was on his phone." They searched everywhere but couldn't find Nelson's phone. Then, Auntie Moami called his number and heard a ringing under the couch. They retrieved the phone, confirming it was Nelson's. Sarah noticed someone spying on them through the window. She quietly slipped outside and confronted the eavesdropper, discovering it was one of Dr. Adaobi's security guards. He attacked her, but Sarah swiftly overpowered him, leaving him unconscious. Zinni, Auntie Moami, and her sons headed to court while Sarah stayed behind to interrogate the tied-up guard, determined to find out where Dr. Adaobi and Nelson had been taken.
Frank, who had faked his death, was with his men while Dr. Adaobi and Nelson were tied to chairs. He revealed his plan to get rid of Adaobi for good. "You were such a pain," he sneered. "I had to kill Lillian and fake my own death to finally get you out of the way." He gloated over his apparent success. "Nelson, you could have had a good life with me, but you chose to be as stubborn as your foolish mother." Meanwhile, Sarah infiltrated the building, silently taking out the guards one by one. A security camera spotted her, and Frank sent his men after her. Sarah dispatched them efficiently, making her way to the room where Frank and his remaining men held Adaobi and Nelson. When Sarah confronted them, she gestured for them to drop their guns, tossing her own weapon aside. They attacked, but she fought them off with her bare hands, leaving their faces bruised and broken. She killed Frank's men and shot Frank twice in the chest, ensuring he was dead for real this time. Dr. Adaobi and Nelson arrived at the court just in time to testify against the Bayods, ready to reveal the truth and seek justice. Chief Bayod was sentenced to death by firing squad. Dr. Adaobi and Nelson were reunited, their bond stronger than ever. The world celebrated Dr. Adaobi, recognizing her as a true warrior. She had proven herself to be a lioness, fierce and unstoppable in her fight for justice and her family.